We've all heard about Hannibal Barca, the brilliant Carthaginian general who led an army over the Alps to invade Italy during the Second Punic War. But what's less known is how Hannibal's audacious invasion actually went down, and why it still remains one of history's most legendary military campaigns. Most people know that Hannibal wanted revenge against Rome. His father, Hannibal Barca, waged war against Rome and lost his life in battle. As a result, Hannibal swore an oath to get revenge for his father. But there's more to Hannibal's motivation than just blind hatred. You see, Carthage and Rome were locked in a constant struggle for dominance in the Western Mediterranean. Both saw themselves as the masters of the region, and only one would come out on top. Rome controlled the Italian peninsula and western Sicily, while Carthage ruled over most of Spain and had a strong presence in North Africa. The two powers had clashed before in the First Punic War, which ended in stalemate. But now, under the ambitious Hannibal Barca and his equally cunning brother Hasdrubal, Carthage was preparing for a new conflict. The brothers planned to strike Rome where it hurt the most, its economy, by launching a surprise attack on the resource-rich province of Saguntum, which was allied with Rome. Hannibal and his brother hoped to force the Romans into a defensive war, which would devastate their economy. Rome responded by declaring war on Carthage and sending an army to stop Hannibal. But the Carthaginians won a decisive victory at the Battle of the Trebia in 218 BC, thanks in part to Hannibal's innovative battle tactics. Although victorious, Hannibal knew he couldn't win a war on the Italian peninsula alone. He needed help, so he sent messengers to various states across the Mediterranean asking for troops. Some agreed, including Spain, which sent 8,000 infantry and 600 cavalry, but Hannibal wasn't done. He knew that to really have a chance of defeating Rome, he needed to do something bold, something the Romans wouldn't expect. That's when Hannibal hatched his most famous plan, crossing the Alps with war elephants. The idea might sound crazy today, but back then it was unheard of. Elephants were large, powerful animals that could trample enemy soldiers and even break through the ranks of enemy cavalry. But they were also slow and vulnerable to cold weather. No one had ever tried to march elephants over the Alps, let alone into enemy territory. But Hannibal was up for the challenge. He assembled a force of around 37,000 infantry, 10,000 cavalry and 36 elephants. Then, in the summer of 218 BC, he began his journey. The crossing was long and arduous. The elephants had to be carried over the highest passes in the Alps, where the ground was covered in snow and ice. Many of the men also died from exposure or starvation, but Hannibal pressed on. Finally, after weeks of travel, they reached the other side of the mountains in northern Italy. The Romans were stunned. They had expected Hannibal to come through the eastern Mediterranean or from Africa, but not from the north, and they certainly weren't prepared for an elephant attack. As the Carthaginians advanced through Italy, they won several battles against the Romans, including the Battle of the Lake Trasimene in 217 BC, where Hannibal's army ambushed a larger Roman force, killing or capturing almost the entire army. Hannibal's daring invasion had caught the Romans off guard, and they were now in full-scale war with Carthage. With his victories, Hannibal had proven that Rome was not invincible, and that gave other states around the Mediterranean the confidence to join the war on Carthage's side. But Rome wasn't about to give up. They sent one general after another to defeat Hannibal, though none were successful. In fact, Rome's most famous general Scipio Africanus started his career in this war, fighting against Hannibal in Spain. While Rome struggled to stop Hannibal in Italy, they found success in Spain, where Scipio helped capture the Carthaginian city of New Carthage. Enraged by this defeat, Hannibal returned to Spain in 211 BC, hoping to turn the tide of the war in his favor. But once again, he faced a brilliant Roman general, this time Lucius Aemilius Paulus Macedonicus. The two armies met in battle at the river Baetis in southern Spain in 209 BC. It was a close fight, but in the end, Hannibal was defeated. With his army depleted, Hannibal retreated back to North Africa, where he regrouped and launched a counterattack into Sicily. Once again, he achieved some victories, but ultimately he was defeated by the Romans. Meanwhile, Rome made steady progress in Spain, gradually pushing the Carthaginians back toward the Atlas Mountains. In 206 BC, Rome's worst fears were realized. Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal, who had been trying to relieve Hannibal in northern Italy, was killed in battle with the Roman general Marcus Livius Septimius. With his allies defeated and his own position becoming increasingly desperate, Hannibal knew he had to make one last stand. He assembled what was left of his army and marched it into the hills of northern Africa. There he awaited the coming storm. Rome had taken full control of the western Mediterranean, and now they were coming for him. In 204 BC, Scipio Africanus arrived in Africa with a large Roman army. Hannibal and his Numidian allies tried to stop them, but were defeated at the Battle of the Great River. Hannibal retreated to his base, but it was too late. The Romans were inside the city and negotiations soon began. For Hannibal, the terms were generous. He was allowed to keep his fortune and his elephants, and he wasn't even banished from Italy. He was allowed to live out the rest of his life in exile in the city of Bithynia. Although the war was over, Hannibal's reputation as a brilliant general lived on. His daring invasion of Italy had changed the course of history and proved that Rome was not invincible. So what makes Hannibal's invasion of Italy so legendary? Well, first, there's the sheer audacity of the plan. No one had ever tried to march elephants over the Alps before, let alone into enemy territory. Hannibal's plan was risky, but it paid off. The Romans weren't prepared for an elephant attack, and Hannibal used that to his advantage. Second, there's the sheer scale of the operation. Hannibal's army was huge, numbering in the tens of thousands. He also had to coordinate with other armies around the Mediterranean to keep the pressure on Rome. Third, there's the human element. Hannibal's army suffered greatly during the crossing of the Alps. Many of the men died from exposure or starvation, but Hannibal pressed on. Finally, there's the impact of the invasion. Hannibal's invasion changed the course of history. It proved that Rome was not invincible, and that gave other states around the Mediterranean the confidence to challenge Roman dominance. Hannibal's invasion of Italy is one of history's most legendary military campaigns, because it was a perfect combination of planning, audacity, scale, and determination. Despite the odds being stacked against him, Hannibal and his army achieved victory after victory, and although he eventually lost the war, his legacy as a brilliant general lives on. So what do you think? What makes Hannibal's invasion of Italy so legendary? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my other videos on ancient history. Thanks for watching.